Okay, in this video, I'm going to go over some exercises in chapter 4, just to make sure that you're getting the basic ideas that the book wants to communicate. Chapter 4 deals with credibility, and credibility basically means the same thing as believability or trustworthiness. A claim is credible if it's believable. So if somebody tells you something and they say they were driving down, the freeway and they saw an accident along the side and they saw, an ambulance and they saw somebody that seemed to be a dead body, being put into the ambulance. Is that a credible claim? Yeah, it's credible. It's believable. That stuff happens all the time. But if somebody tells you they were on their way to school and they were abducted by a UFO, that's not very credible. Now, it's logically possible, but it's not very believable compared, to the first claim. So basically, credibility means believability. That's what we're dealing with. And one of the most important things about critical thinking is the ability to distinguish between credible claims and incredible claims. When we're constantly being bombarded with claims on the internet, in books we read, by friends who tell us things. What are we supposed to believe and what are we not supposed to believe? Basically, that's what this chapter is about. It's about being able to assess what you should it's what's credible, and being suspicious when you should be suspicious. Basically, the bottom line is when somebody makes a claim, you need evidence. If it contradicts what you believe about the world, your own observations, if it seems like a kind of a weird claim, be suspicious, demand evidence. When somebody comes up with a theory, a lot of people nowadays have these conspiracy theories about what's happening. Some people believe you could on the internet you can come across anything. Some people believe the Earth is flat. Some people believe reptilians from other planets and galaxies are among us. Well, are we supposed to believe what they say, or should we check it out? Basically, the bottom line is you should check things out that are not obvious to you. Don't just believe whatever people say. Okay, I'm going to go over some of the exercises. Exercise 4.1. The text points out that physical conditions around us affect our observations. List at least 4 such conditions. Okay, what this question is getting at is this. When we see things and observe things, sometimes things are getting in our, sometimes physical conditions make our observations that distort our observations. Well, what are some of these? Well, it could be too dark outside, right? Well, if you're seeing something and it's dark outside, you may not be seeing very clearly. You're not seeing very clearly. So in courts of law, if somebody says, "Well, I saw that person," the attorney asking questions will say, "Well, could you clearly see the person? Was it dark outside?" And if it was dark outside, your testimony is not going to be worth very much. So it could be too. What are some of the things that can affect our observations? Too dark. It could be too noisy. Because observations don't just have to do with eyesight, also things with things we hear. It could be too noisy. It could be smoke in the room. The event could be happening too fast, really quickly, and this goes by so fast you didn't see it. Anything. There's 4. I mean, it is 1 and 4. Number 2, our own mental state can affect our observations as well. Well, what are some of these mental states? Well, fear, for example, can affect your mental states. If you're fearful, you're going to see things that maybe are not there. I mean, if you're afraid of ghosts and you're in a house at night, late at night, you might start hearing things that are not there because of your fear. Other mental states might be you're distracted and you're thinking of other things, so that can distort your observation. Anxiety, fear, distraction, you might be too tired. What else? Or you're emotionally upset. All these emotional things can affect your observations. Number 3, according to the text, there are two ways credibility should enter into our evaluation of a claim. What are they? First of all, when somebody makes a claim, the first thing is consider the inherent credibility of the claim. Does it seem to make sense? That's the first thing. I mean, does the claim seem just like, oh, okay, big deal? It seems obvious. You don't see any problems with it. If it seems really weird, then you should be suspicious. So basically, first of all, the inherent credibility of the claim. That's what you want to look at. And by that, it means that a claim is inherently credible if it doesn't contradict anything that you have observed in the world, if it doesn't contradict your background information, just your basic knowledge of how the world works, and if it doesn't contradict other credible claims that you already believe to be true. So if somebody tells you something, they say, well, I saw John at the party at 2 o'clock, and you know that John was with you at 2 o'clock in a different place. Well, that contradicts your own observation. You saw John, you were with him. If somebody tells you he was somewhere else, you should reject that claim because it contradicts your own observations. If somebody tells you something, the one I gave at the beginning, if they said they were abducted by a UFO on the way to school, well, that conflicts with your basic understanding of how the world works. You know that people just don't get abducted by UFOs. You've never heard of any case like that that's been borne out. It's a weird claim, so you should be very, very suspicious of it. So basically, the answer to 3 is the 2 things that you should be concerned about when somebody says something are first of all, the inherent credibility of the claim. Does it contradict basic things you know about the world or your own observations? And second of all, consider the source. Who's telling you that information? Where are you getting that information? If you're standing in a line at the store and you're reading some tabloid newspaper, and it's talking about, tabloids that tell you they just make stuff up. They talk about UFOs, aliens coming down all the time. Are you supposed to believe that stuff? No, you look at where it's coming from, and it's a joke. On the other hand, if you're reading in the New York Times and there's an article about some scientists who think that there actually was a UFO sighting, a true UFO sighting, that you should take more seriously because it's coming from a different source. It's coming from the New York Times, and they don't make up nonsense like tabloids do. If you have a friend that always is lying to you and always making stories up, and they tell you that they were driving down the freeway and they saw an accident and they saw 2 dead bodies coming from the ambulance, should you believe it? Well, I mean, if your friend often lies and they just make stuff up, I would be suspicious of that because maybe they lie. They like to tell stories. On the other hand, if you have a friend that he never lies to you, and he's always honest, and he tells you, yeah, I was driving to the work and I saw an accident, and yeah, believe it. Why not? I mean, at least you shouldn't be suspicious about it. That's not nothing strange about that claim. So consider the source. If there's somebody that is constantly lying to you, you should be very suspicious. If you have a friend that's very honest, don't be suspicious. So consider the source. Consider the source. The internet is full of, anybody can get on the internet and post anything they want on the internet. So just because you say, I read something on the internet about a conspiracy, why believe it? You need to consider credible sources. And to do that, basically the New York Times, basically the established newspapers and the established television stations are credible when it comes to certain things. When it comes to reporting U.S. foreign policy and stuff, you should be suspicious. But when it comes to basically just reporting the news, the NBC, CBS, ABC are credible. New York Times, Washington Post, these are credible sources. Normally they don't just make stories up. They do sometimes, but normally they don't. So basically, the answer to number 3 is consider the source, consider who's telling you the information. If they're not trustworthy, you should be suspicious. And also look at the inherent credibility of the statement. Okay, number 4. A claim lacks inherent credibility, according to the text. When it conflicts with what? Well, I already mentioned that. When it conflicts with your basic background information. That means all the things you know about the world that you can't remember where you learned them from, but you know that they're true. You know, for example, that the North Pole is cold. There's ice there. You've never been there, but it's just part of your background information. You know that water, when you jump into water, you're going to sink. You know that the ocean is pretty big, right? You can't swim across the ocean. So if somebody tells you they swam across the ocean, you should, reject that claim right off the bat because that's part of your background information. If somebody says they lifted 10,000 pounds, you can reject that too because you know that doesn't happen. So 4, a claim lacks inherent credibility according to text when it conflicts with your basic observations, your background information, and other things that you know are true, other credible beliefs that you have. 5, our most reliable source of information about the world is what? Is your personal observation. When somebody tells you something that you know did not happen because you were there and you actually saw it, you could reject that claim right immediately because you saw it with your own eyes. Now, there are cases of course, when you're seeing, like in when you see something from a distance, and you may be mistaken when it comes to personal identity and things like that. So your personal observation is not infallible. You can make mistakes, but there are certain things you cannot make mistakes. Right? For example, there's a pen right here. It's a purple pen. Now, I see it. If somebody tells me that in this room there's no purple pen, I know they're lying. I know it's not true because I see one right here. When you are the world's expert on things that are right, that you see and other people don't. I mean, just look around you, right where you are right now. You're the world's expert on what's there. No one knows better than you of what you see. So our most reliable source of information is our own observation. Number 6, the reliability of our observations is no better than the reliability of our what? Our memory. When you see something, you observe some scene, you observe something, well, okay, you know what happened because you're right there. But, as time goes on, tomorrow, you're not going to remember all the details that you remember today because time has gone on. 2 days go on, 3 days, 4 days, eventually a week goes on, a month goes on, 2 months, 3 months, and then, somebody says, well, what happened? Well, as time goes on, your memory gets worse and worse, so it becomes very unreliable. So you can't always trust your memory, but there are certain things the reliability of our observations is no better than the reliability of our memory. And as time goes on, our memory gets worse and worse. Okay. Anyway, that's all. I'll do all the other exercises in the book, but then that's enough for today. And I'll do some more in a little while. Thank you.